Can everyone hear me? Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Awesome. I can see Petronella Mary. Welcome. Welcome, everyone, to our webinar. This is a webinar co-hosted by OWIT Zimbabwe and Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation. Thank you for making it to our webinar today. The topic is amplifying our voices, empowering women through trade facilitation. Our moderator, Muchamlingo, is on board with us. Who is Muchamlingo? Let me just read you a brief bio about Muchamlingo. Muchamlingo is the founder and lead change maker of PTS Africa. A self-professed emotional intelligence fanatic, Mucha is on a mission to transform Africa. Mucha believes that individuals, communities, and organizations can leverage the scientifically based skill of emotional intelligence, EQ, to increase effectiveness, improve well-being, strengthen relationships, and improve quality of life. Mucha is passionate about empowering people to take ownership of a positive future. Mucha is the founder and lead change maker at PTS Africa, a boutique consultancy firm dedicated to the development of people. PTS Africa uses this expertise in EQ as a foundation to assist organizations to successfully navigate change, reboot culture, drive sustainable performance. Mucha has a master's in organization psychology from the University of London. Mucha is a former OWIT Nairobi president and the current board advisor. Thank you. Over to you, Mucha.
Thank you very much, Lengi. Good afternoon to you all. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for this amazing conversation that we're going to be having about empowering women through trade facilitation. I am truly excited to be here, and I'm happy that I will be facilitating this conversation with a number of trade experts who are going to share their thoughts about how trade can be of benefit for women who are trading across borders. So very happy to have you here, and thank you so much, Klengi, for the introduction. It's been a while since I've actually been on a forum, Klengi, where someone can actually say my name exactly how it's supposed to be pronounced. So thank you very much for that. And like I said, I'm very happy to be here. So as you've heard, my name is Mucha, and I'm the most recent former president of OWIT Nairobi, and very happy to be here today. The Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation and OWIT Zimbabwe, our sister chapter of OWIT, the Organization for Women in International Trade, are co-hosting this webinar on trade facilitation for MSMEs and women engaged in international trade and regional trade across Africa. This session is really to provide us with an opportunity to learn about the World Trade Organization's Trade Facilitation Agreement and how its implementation can work for women and their businesses. And especially in the context of COVID-19, we want to have a conversation about how facilitating trade will play an ever important role in economic recovery. So you're very welcome. You are in the right place. Our objectives today are as follows: to really build knowledge of the international and regional trade agreements related to trade facilitation, specifically the TFA and the African Continental Free Trade Area, to build awareness of the importance of gender-sensitive trade facilitation reform and how trade facilitation can be beneficial for women who are doing cross-border trade. We also want to look at how we can promote how women in the local private sector can get involved with trade facilitation reform. And lastly, to raise awareness of the different organizations who are working in this space. And on this webinar today, we have the Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation, we have OWIT, we have TFO Canada, and we have UPS. So very happy to have each of those players on board to help us drive this conversation. So we will start with some presentations. We'll start with a presentation on the Trade Facilitation Agreement. Then we'll have the panelists do their opening presentations. And then we will have a Q&A session where you'll be able to share the questions that you have. This meeting is using the Zoom webinar, so your cameras and microphones will be kept off. We're encouraging you to enter your questions through the Q&A function found at the bottom center of your screen. And I'd like you to note that this session is being recorded. As we move quickly along, we have a lot to cover. I'd like to start by introducing Candice White, who is a knowledge specialist from the Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation. Candice works for the Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation, a joint initiative of the World Economic Forum in Geneva, the International Chamber of Commerce in Paris, and the Center for International Private Enterprise in Washington, DC, in partnership with GIZ in Germany. The Alliance helps developing and least developed countries to implement the Trade Facilitation Agreement. The Alliance is currently implementing 11 projects in 11 countries, including Zambia, Malawi, Ghana, Kenya, and Nigeria. Candice works on making Alliance projects inclusive of gender and small business. She holds an HBA from Ivy Business School at Western University in London, Canada, and an MA in International Affairs from the Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies in Geneva, Switzerland. Candice, you're very welcome. Please do come and talk to us about the Trade Facilitation Agreement. You're welcome, Candice.
Thank you so much, Muja. I hope everyone can hear me all right. Welcome to the webinar. We're very, very excited to be with you today, and I'm especially excited to be among such a wonderful array of panelists and a wonderful moderator as well. One of our goals today that Muja has mentioned is to raise awareness of the Trade Facilitation Agreement. We really think it's important that private sector is incentivized and aware of this agreement so that they can be part of the implementation process. And of course, our specific topic today is more on the nexus between trade facilitation and gender. But in order to get there, I think it's good that we kind of ground the conversation in what is the Trade Facilitation Agreement and better understanding what benefits it can bring. Could we go to the next slide, please? So the Trade Facilitation Agreement, just to give you some kind of basic facts about it. So it's a binding multilateral agreement that was negotiated in the World Trade Organization, so by the member countries of the WTO. The TFA, as I will refer to it, was concluded in December 2013, but entered into force in 2017 when it was ratified by about 2/3 of WTO members. The agreement is designed to tackle the barriers to trade posed by burdensome border requirements. And what this means is that it's a commitment by governments to increase transparency and efficiency, to reduce bureaucracy and corruption, and ultimately to make trade simpler, faster, and more cost-effective. If we look at the benefits of the Trade Facilitation Agreement, they accrue to three main parties, which is really a win-win-win to business, to government, and also to consumers. On the business side, we see that the Trade Facilitation Agreement is estimated to reduce trade costs by up to 14.3% on average, and also to boost global trade by USD 1 trillion per year. So obviously there's a huge potential upside for businesses in the implementation of this agreement. It will also benefit governments in that it will drive efficiency of border agencies and also enhance revenue collection through increasing formal trade and allowing the countries to become more competitive as their costs are reduced to trade. Just to give an example, a project that we recently completed in Colombia as the Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation is one where we introduced a new risk management system. And this allowed to, so far, see a 30% reduction in physical inspections. So obviously the time and cost savings there will accrue to businesses, but also be quite beneficial to governments. Also on the consumer side, implementation of this agreement will deliver better value for consumers. It will protect food security and has the opportunity to create around 20 million jobs, which should be mostly in developing countries. So now what I'll do kind of for the rest of this short presentation is just to give you a little bit more of a deeper dive into the Trade Facilitation Agreement. Next slide, please. And basically it'll help you understand what have your governments committed to doing when they've signed on and negotiated in this agreement. And so this slide summarizes 12 key articles that are sort of the main commitments of the TFA. And it's essentially an agreement between the public and the private sector that by implementing these 12 things, we will see the benefits that are referred to on the previous slide. So just to give a couple examples, I won't go through them all because obviously there's quite a lot there, but Article 1 is about the publication and availability of information. So this is about basically that governments have committed to publishing a wide range of customs-specific information, so including information on duties and taxes, on trade procedures, on forms and documents that you would need to import and export. And so the goal is to make these forms, processes, etc., quite easily accessible so that when you, as someone who's trading cross borders, are looking to do that, you don't have to spend an enormous amount of resources and time looking for the right kind of procedures and guidance in order to trade. Looking also at Article 2, just to give another example, provides, basically it's a commitment that governments will hold consultations with stakeholders before they introduce new measures on trade. And so this is also very important in that it shows that governments are committing to engaging with private sector, so engaged with or committed to engaging with yourself before they're creating new trade measures. Moving along, I'll jump over to Article 7 because this is quite a heavy article. There's a lot within there, within the different sub articles. And basically it's a different commitments to allow for efficient release and clearance of goods. And this means several different things. Just to give a few examples, it means accepting electronic payments. It also means implementing pre-arrival processing so that goods will be cleared much faster. It also includes risk management systems, like the one that I referred to earlier that we've implemented in Colombia. So basically doing all of these things should make trade a lot more streamlined and save time and money. And one other important thing to note about the Trade Facilitation Agreement, in addition to these 12 articles, is that it gives a special and differential treatment to developing and least developed countries. And this is referred to in the box at the bottom of this slide where we talk about category A, B, or C. So essentially when the countries have concluded the negotiations, they said, I will notify these 12 articles according to how easy or difficult it is for me to implement these. So in sort of layman's terms, to put it that way. So if they're category A, it means that they basically have already implemented this because they've agreed they'll implement it by the time the agreement enters into force, which it did in 2017. Category B is provisions that the member will implement after a transitional period following the entry into force of the agreement. And category C is provisions that were notified to basically saying that you require assistance or support for capacity building. And so essentially, this is sort of the reason behind the existence of the Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation is that we're here to help countries to implement these articles of the Trade Facilitation Agreement and make trade easier and faster for you and your businesses. So now that you have this sort of basic understanding of what the Trade Facilitation Agreement is, we will turn to the panel discussion, which I'm very excited for, and talk a little bit more specifically about the importance of this TFA for women and other agreements like it. Thank you, Mucha. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Candice, for that insightful presentation and for breaking it down for us so that we can understand what the TFA is and how the TFA can help us. We want to move to our next presentation. We're going to move to our next presentation. Again, excuse me, again, a presentation from each of the different panelists. All right, and coming up now, we have Hlengi Ndlovu, who is the president of OWIT Zimbabwe. I'm very excited to introduce her. OWIT Zimbabwe is one of the babies in the OWIT family, and we are really excited to have OWIT Zimbabwe on board and excited to have them host this amazing webinar. So Hlengi is a champion of the trade and gender agenda. She is self-driven and passionate about women economic empowerment. She is the founder of the Organization of Women in International Trade, the Zimbabwe chapter, and its current president. Hlengi has a vast experience in trade facilitation, having worked extensively for the government of Zimbabwe and the private sector, primarily in the logistics industry. Her business acumen has enabled her to sit on various boards of different successful entities. As an eloquent speaker, Hlengi has also been able to negotiate, initiate dialogue on difficult topics, endearing herself to different communities within society. She is the authentic voice of the marginalized and was part of the first UN working group on discrimination against women and girls held in Addis Ababa in November 2019, after participating in Global Governance Program on Services in Trade and SDGs held at Robert Schuman Center of Advanced Studies in Florence, Italy. As the past president of Rotary Club of Bulawayo, she championed the construction of the Waiting Mothers Shelter for Women in Lupane, reducing maternal deaths as well as infant mortality. Hlengi is an accomplished writer with 2 successful books. Her debut novella, Who Will Feed My Birds, was shortlisted in the prestigious National Arts Merit Award, while her second book, Red Soils, is cited in the 2017 Zambezia Journal of the University of Zimbabwe. She is a columnist of the National Business Weekly, The Herald, and she holds a master's in business administration and has received training with UNTED and the Institute of Economic Development programs on making the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement work, border management, and trade and gender linkages. Hlengi, thank you so much for being with us today, and we look forward to your presentation. You're very welcome.
Thank you, Mucha. Before wasting my time, let me welcome our participants once more, and thank you again for creating this time to actually create conversations around trade issues as women. First and foremost, I would like to talk more about Organization of Women in International Trade, the Zimbabwe chapter. As Mucha has said, this is a newly formed chapter, having voted for last year in October at Tampa, Florida. It was an awesome moment for Zimbabwe. Now, what does it mean for Zimbabwe? What does it mean for women in Africa? We all know that research has said that women's movements have actually been slow in actually achieving their agendas because of the fragmentation. And the silo mentality has been spoken about very extensively. So OWIT Zimbabwe is actually riding on this, that as women, we need to come together as associations to actually have a collective voice when we are lobbying for our governments to actually create enabling environments for trade. What is so important about trade? Trade is the drivers of economies. And as we know, the African economies are mostly driven by women in the informal sector and by women in cross-border trade. So OWIT Zimbabwe and OWIT International, OWIT Zimbabwe is an affiliate of OWIT International. Through volunteering, they have organized women to come together so that we can actually create conversations about trade, on what we want to be done. More so, as we talk about the Africa Continent Free Trade Agreement, it's been noted that women are the hidden faces of trade. Actually, this is a concept I have borrowed from Susan Barker of Toronto, Canada. She says women are the hidden faces. And as such, OWIT Zimbabwe is there to actually promote women, amplify their voices in Africa and in Zimbabwe as well, so that our leaders, our political leaders, our policymakers, when they are gender mainstreaming, they should know exactly what we expect as women. Through volunteer work, OWIT is reaching out to the African countries to open chapters so that in our efforts, no one is left behind. This webinar has come at an opportune time when the Africa Continent Free Trade Agreement is on the cards. Were it not for the pandemic, for the COVID-19 pandemic, right now, this agreement should be in place. This is exciting news for our women. We want ourselves as women to be talking about the AFCFTA wherever we are, because it's going to be a game changer for Africa. And more so, the AFCFTA has got a clause, Article 3E, where it speaks specifically about women. It's about the socio-economic inclusion of women. We want to make sure that no one is left behind. As it is well known, and as research actually says it all, the findings on research are that trade agreements inadvertently leave women behind. It is because the people who tend, or the organizations that tend to benefit from trade agreements are multinational corporations. They are our big companies, leaving behind the SMEs and women-driven businesses. So the AFCFTA is for us women now, that we actually enjoy the huge market that is going to be created by this agreement. And this agreement is said to be the largest in the world, comprising of 54 countries. Yes, 54 countries have signed and 30 have ratified, meaning that come January, this agreement will be enforced. And what are we as women going to be doing about this agreement? OWIT Zimbabwe wants to ensure that as the agreement presents the low-hanging fruits, our women in Africa are part of those that are going to enjoy those first fruits. And considering that also Africa is driven by women in agriculture as well. The statistics in agriculture show that more than 80% of women are in the agricultural sector, but sadly, most of them remain confined in subsistence farming. And it is OWIT of Zimbabwe's mandatory to see that our women actually enjoy the fruits of the AFCFTA by being empowered in the agricultural sector, having the right capacity to venture into international markets. I know much I've given me 7 minutes, but there's so much to talk about, especially about OWIT Zimbabwe and the AFCFTA. And speaking about the trade facilitation, it has been realized that as long as we don't tackle trade facilitation, trade is going to be costly. And yet today, we are going to be taking how we can make trade facilitation work for women. Trade facilitation will be there to actually address issues on achieving cost-effective trade that is predictable, trade that is certain. We cannot speak about trade facilitation without speaking about our borders. And for now, I think my time is up. I hand it over to you, Mucha.
Thank you very much, Lengi, for that. I was scribbling furiously as you were sharing. Thank you for the insights you have shared. We really appreciate your take. And as I mentioned, as I was introducing you, I am definitely one of those who's delighted to have OWIT Zimbabwe take her place and really work to amplify the voices of women in trade. I know Susan Barker quite well, and I really like the quotation that you shared of hers, that, you know, we need to make sure that women are not the hidden faces of trade, that we make sure women are front and center. Let me just share, it has been posted in the chat, but let me highlight for social media sharing. For social media sharing, please use the hashtag Women in Trade and tag at OWIT Zimbabwe and tag at Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation. All right, so please make sure that you utilize that if you are sharing on social media. So we are moving on with our program. And coming up next is our next presentation, which will be by Mary Heather White, from the Trade Facilitation Office in Canada. Mary Heather White is the Program Director for Africa, and for Africa and Haiti for TFO Canada. She's currently managing 2 projects funded by Global Affairs Canada, making trade work for women in sub-Saharan Africa, which encompasses Lesotho, Uganda, Madagascar, and Ethiopia, and Women in Trade for Inclusive and Sustainable Growth, which is implemented in 12 sub-Saharan African countries. She also works on a research project funded by the International Development Research Center, which covers Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, and Madagascar. Her role includes planning and implementation, donor communications, and partnership management. Mary Heather has more than 20 years experience in the development sector, contributing to sustainable and inclusive livelihoods for women, men, and youth through vocational skills training, entrepreneurship, and disaster response and recovery, and by being a gender equity champion. She has worked with numerous leading nonprofits, both in Canada and overseas. Mary Heather holds an MA in International Development from the Norman Paterson School of International Affairs, Ottawa. I have had the privilege of interacting with Mary Heather, and I can confirm that she really is indeed a champion of women in trade. Mary Heather, you're very welcome. Thank you so much. We're looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much, Mucha. And I was going to say the same thing. It's quite great to be on the call this morning with so many trade and gender champions. And of course, I've met Mucha in person and now getting to know many other of the OWIT great ladies through our virtual calls. And of course, Susan's name has been mentioned this morning. Susan is also associated with TFO Canada and other colleagues from OWIT like Alma Farias. And TFO does have a long-standing relationship with OWIT and have just embarked on a new partnership with Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation, which we hope is going to also be a long-standing partnership. So I'm going to keep my eye on the clock, but try to complement what's been said already this morning by telling you a bit about TFO Canada and how we work to support women SMEs in the international trade space. So you can go to the next slide. Our organization is a Canadian nonprofit, and for the past 40 years, we've been improving lives through creating sustainable partnerships for SMEs from developing countries. And more recently, our strategic objective is really focused on specialized trade programming to support women's empowerment. Now, we know on the call today, we have so many leading women entrepreneurs and exporters, but this space is definitely one where there's a need for more women to step in there, and so that we can see more gender equality in the international trade space. Next slide, please. You can go to the next slide, yeah. So TFO Canada has, we have worked a lot in different trade sectors with our particular expertise in the Canadian import market. And through our programs, we've had a lot of success in the agri-food sector. We have, our approach is to work in partnership with trade support institutions, and that includes organizations like OWIT, but also other trade support institutions like chambers of commerce, export promotion boards, and other business and trade associations. We provide capacity building and technical assistance so that these institutions can better support their clients by providing information, advice, and contacts in the Canadian market. And as mentioned, this programming that we are providing more recently is now honing in on the more specific needs of women exporters and how we can better support them. A lot of the training and information that we provide is available for free on our website. It's available for any trade support institution as well as any SME from a developing country to access. So we would be most delighted for you to check out our website and to see some of the information and resources there. In addition to our website, we do have the specific projects. 2 of those have already been mentioned. We have had a lot of funding over the past 40 years from the Government of Canada, and it's through their support that we are able to offer those online services for free. Our projects, in addition to supporting TSIs through capacity building, the other aim is for us to help SMEs understand and take advantage of free trade agreements, particularly those that countries have with Canada. So for instance, sensitizing SMEs about the free trade agreements that exist and building their skills to identify and respond to export opportunities in those markets. And in particular, I'm speaking about Canadian market. And we know that Canada does have a market access initiative, which does provide reduced tariffs for developing countries as well as least developed countries. And so it's our intention to make those opportunities available, but also to understand how to better tap into them. So our services include information, tools and training about the Canadian market and specific sectors. And I would like to also highlight that yes, the fruit and vegetable, processed foods, agri-food sector is definitely one of the largest import markets in Canada. And as I mentioned earlier, SMEs from Latin America have been very successful tapping into this market and particularly taking advantage of free trade agreements in place with those countries. For example, the Pacific Alliance. So I'm just going to go to the next slide and mention a few things here. The reason I want to go to the next slide is because this sort of gives you a visual of our website, where you can access a variety of information, tools, and services for free. Many of those are available as soon as you click on the website. To dig a bit deeper and to get a little bit more detailed information, we encourage you to register, as some of it is only available if you register. Our website is, a lot of it is mobile enabled, so you can even access it while I'm talking to you today. You can see the website link there, and you can certainly try accessing it through your phones. If you are already exporting, you can upload your information about your company to our online registry and upload your product and service offers. And those will be visible to Canadian importers who are looking for new suppliers. And that will direct them to get in touch with you directly to get more details and to place orders. So that just gives you a very quick look at what some of the information, tools, and resources would be on the website. We can go to the next slide. Here, as I mentioned, some of the tools that you can access once you're registered. You can either use the drop-down menu at the top, or you can click on the icons. If you click on the icon with the Canadian flag, you'll be taken to the list of our market information papers. So if you can go to the next slide, you can see some visuals there One of our most popular market information paper is the overview of Canadian market, which is our Access Canada Guide. It provides specific information on the Canadian market and our sector-specific market information papers. There's an example there on the right-hand side of the processed fruits and vegetables market information paper. That provides information about demand, our current sourcing countries, trends in imports, pricing, distribution systems, major buyers. Information as well about standards and requirements that you will need to comply with to enter the Canadian market. So we'll just skip over the next slide and we'll go to the next one. This just gives you a visual of if you click on the website, this will provide you with direct links to some other important websites. For instance, this will take you to the Canadian Border Services Agency or the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, where you will find a lot of tools related to those requirements. So for instance, labeling checklists that you need to follow, information about the Safe Food for Canadians Act, and information about who bears responsibility for some of the import processes. So currently, a lot of the responsibility is actually on the importer for ensuring that the suppliers they work with have food safety measures in place. And this has been one of the recent changes with the Canadian Food Safety Act that was recently introduced. So we'll go to the next slide. Just to mention that we have also webinars on our website that have a lot of relevant topics about Canada's trade, as well as specific sectors. We also talk about skills that you can develop, for instance, preparing for trade shows, how to negotiate in the Canadian context and better understand the nuances of dealing with Canadian buyers and importers, some tips and tricks there. All of these are recorded, so you can listen to them anytime. And you'll notice that we have some specific webinars related to the current COVID situation, which talks about new opportunities as well as changes that we're currently experiencing. And on our website, you will also find a COVID page, which will keep you up to date on the current situation in Canada as we go through this pandemic and the impact that it is having on cross-border trade into Canada. And I'm going to stop there, but just as a little promo, you can go to the website and do an export readiness quiz for the Canadian market. So for those of you who are interested in learning more about the Canadian market, I recommend you to start with the quiz, and your answers to the quiz will automatically take you to the relevant section of the website where you can learn more or develop the skills that you need in order to become a successful women exporter into the Canadian market. So I'm going to close there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary Heather, for that insightful presentation. And I like that last point that you have left us with, that we can take the export readiness quiz and the answers will take you to the relevant part of the website where you can upskill so that you can be successful in your bid to trade with Canada. So thank you very much for that. All right, so coming up next, we have a presentation from Esther Ndichu, the Managing Director, Southern and Eastern Africa from UPS. Really excited to have UPS with us today and making their presentation, sharing some of the work that they have been doing. Esther is based out of Johannesburg, South Africa, and she has been there since April 2018. In her current role, she is responsible for managing and growing the UPS business in the South Africa and managing the network of UPS authorized service contractors in the Eastern and Southern region of the continent. Most recently, Esther served as the Vice President of Public Affairs and Government Relations for UPS in the Indian subcontinent, Middle East and Africa, based in Dubai, where she was since January 2016. In this role, she was responsible for public government and customs affairs for the region. Her core focus areas and interests included increasing cross-border trade and identifying ways to assist SMEs to access global markets. Prior to this, Esther was responsible for the UPS Foundation's global humanitarian engagements, working with various organizations in the humanitarian space based in Brussels, Belgium. As an individual with a logistics background, she has worked in various capacities at UPS and is able to lend her experience to the organizations she's worked with. Her passion for working in the humanitarian sector was captured in a TED Talk titled "Hunger Isn't a Food Issue, It's a Logistics Issue." I have interacted with Esther and again can confirm that she really is passionate about this space, passionate about empowering women to be able to take up their place. Esther, you are very welcome. Thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you, Mucha, and thanks for that great introduction. I'd like to thank the Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation and OWIT for inviting UPS to join in this great conversation. It's a topic that's really close to our heart. I think just to briefly start, for those of you that do not know my company, UPS is one of the largest logistics providers in the world. We are typically known for courier services, but above and beyond that, we are a leading provider of specialized transportation and logistics services. Every day, we move approximately 3% of the global GDP through our network across 220 countries and territories. We have operations in 50 countries in the continent. As Mucha mentioned, we're utilizing a network of authorized agents, but then we also have fully owned operations in South Africa, Morocco, Nigeria, and of that, I'm responsible for 22 countries. An interesting portfolio with a myriad of interesting challenges as well through those countries. So given our wide global scope, you can understand why we have a stake in growing international trade relationships and reducing barriers at the border. We play an active role both with local and national governments, as well as international forums, in order to promote free trade and supply chain efficiencies that are going to make it easier for our customers to move goods across borders. To that end, we are so proud to support the Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation, and we're proud to see the emphasis on women's participation in trade, since inclusive trade is an area that we at UPS are keenly focused on. So UPS is one of 5 private sector partners that serve on the steering committee of the Alliance, and we helped guide the approach to apply a gender lens to the Alliance's work. We also contributed our insights into the legal barriers that keep women from engaging in international business, leveraging data from the World Bank's Women, Business, and Law report. So because we move such a large volume of goods around the world on a daily basis, one of our biggest policy concerns as a company is trade facilitation and the ability to import and export goods. In Africa today, due to customs challenges, it is therefore challenging to meet consistent standards of guaranteed service, of which UPS is responsible for, and that's what our customers are typically paying for. On-time delivery is paramount to our success and the success of our customers. And it's important for them to be able to reach their consumers in the markets and get their goods out to the markets as fast as possible. So we believe custom reform will lead to greater opportunities for African businesses. And when you think about it, who stands to gain the most from trade facilitation? It's SMEs. When you think about who the greatest drivers of economic growth and employment for any company, for any country, especially in the African context, it's the SMEs. So this brings me to why UPS would focus on women traders in particular. As my UPS colleagues and I work around the world to foster regulatory regimes that enable more trade to happen, we also emphasize the need to enable all entrepreneurs to be able to reap the benefits of facilitated trade. So Africa is the only region in the world where more women, and I'm proud to say this, where more women than men choose to become entrepreneurs. Yes, in Africa, as in many developing countries and regions, women face disproportionate high obstacles to starting businesses and engaging in international trade, which is really sad. Only 1 out of 5 businesses that export is led by a woman. So whilst I'm in the company of fantastic women here, those statistics are actually quite scary. So only 1 out of 5 businesses export is led by a woman. So women-owned businesses don't tap into international markets for very many reasons, including cultural barriers. You've got domestic legislation, lack of IT skills, or lack of resources and information, among other reasons. Yet women economic empowerment through trade benefits everyone. I mean, it's a given. Once a woman is able to create job creation and empower themselves, the ripple effect goes down through multiple levels of the community. So we sought a way to share our expertise in moving goods across borders with women entrepreneurs, especially given the impact that their empowerment has on the global prosperity. As our former CEO has said, investing in women is not only the right thing to do, it's a smart business decision. And while we tend to carry on this sentiment as a company, I'm pleased to report that as of this summer, we have a new female CEO, the first in UPS's 113 years history. And we are celebrating. Many of us are dancing down the hallways because we now have a female CEO at UPS. So about 2 years ago, UPS and the UPS Foundation launched the Women Exporters Program. It's a global effort to enable women-owned businesses to strengthen their skills in order to be able to export around the globe. We're providing webinars and other virtual training tools. And as we can see, even with this forum right now, virtual is the way of the future now. So we educate women entrepreneurs on how to bring their products to foreign consumers, as well as shaping the policy environment to enable more women to succeed. We have established several partnerships. I'll just mention a few. The ITC She Trades Initiative. We've been working with the World Bank, WeFi program. We Connect International. Of course, I can't forget OWIT as well, amongst others. So our collective approach looks at a 3-prong approach. We look at capacity building, so we help build the skills and fill the knowledge gap with the women entrepreneurs. Market access, so ensuring that women business owners know of the opportunities for international growth. What do you need to consider? What are the opportunities that exist out there? Who can we partner with? Can we partner them with to be able to get access into the different international markets? And lastly, advocating for enabling regulatory frameworks and economic environments to remove any barriers that women would be looking for. So as we like to say at UPS, the easier it is to trade, more trade happens. And it's our role as a global company to ensure we can be able to create that opportunity. Of course, I'd be remiss not to talk about the coronavirus pandemic and how we see it impacting small businesses and women in trade. I think the sad reality is that we've seen that women are one of the demographics that are hardest hit by this crisis. It accelerated, we saw the crisis accelerating e-commerce solutions and digitalizing innovations everywhere. Even the smallest business had to become innovative to survive month-long store closures as well as lockdowns. A lot of them moved online to try and mitigate revenue losses. And once online, you can basically reach out to every market in the world. It's just a question of how much your product and website grabs international attention and your ability to be able to ship to those destinations, which is where we come in as an international courier company. So UPS sees tremendous opportunities for women, entrepreneurship and e-commerce once the door is opened to help drive that. And we think this is a great opportunity, or there's an opportunity that can be driven out of this pandemic to allow women entrepreneurs to be able to reach international markets. Over the course of the crisis, we have run a number of webinars for female entrepreneurs around the world, educating them on how to take their business online and even ship globally and how they can thrive. But of course, for e-commerce to be the most viable, sustainable solution for long-term economic growth and for women entrepreneurs and small businesses, we have to be able to make sure that the shipments can actually get there. So I'll touch on the challenges we've been facing under the current crisis a little later during the Q&A session. But getting the market or being able to have a platform to be able to ship is one thing. Being able to put your product out in the market is one thing. Physically being able to get through the borders is another thing, which is where the trade facilitation is critical. TFA is one tool, and we will constantly work with the Global Alliance to make sure that we're advocating for strong trade facilitation. But additionally, we're also weighing in with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area process and the ongoing US negotiations with Kenya towards a bilateral free trade agreement as well. So now more than ever, we need to be pushing for mechanisms like trade facilitation to spur international commerce as a way to promote economic resilience in the wake of the coronavirus. And we all have a part to play in ensuring that we get to where we want to be. Because even with all that we at UPS are doing to make sure women traders know how to engage in cross-border commerce through our Women Exporters program, we still collectively have a lot of work to do in ensuring that regulatory environments and border policies aren't inherently hindering access to trade. And that's why we work with the Alliance, and we think that it's important for us to shine a spotlight on where governments can step up and help make impactful reforms to enable all traders. But I'll stop there for now, and I'll turn it over to you, Mucha, and look forward to answering any questions that the audience might have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Esther. As with all the other panel presentations, I've run out of space. If you could see my little notepad where I'm writing notes from each of the presentations, I have no space left. All right, so let's move now to Candice, who is going to share with us one more time and talk about the Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation. Please remember, we will be going into a question and answer session, and we will answer the questions that you may have. So do keep your questions to hand. We will come to tackle the questions that you have. So Candice, over to you again.
Thank you very much, Mucha, and thank you also to the other ladies who've shared their wonderful insights with us so far. I will take a few minutes here basically to go a little bit deeper on the TFA and how it can be working best for women. So at the start, I'll just introduce the Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation in a bit more detail, although it has been mentioned, of course, several times, and I'm grateful for that. If we can go to the next slide, basically what I want to share is that our mission is to implement the Trade Facilitation Agreement at a very high level. And specifically, this means to enhance trade facilitation implementation by bringing together the public and private sectors. And we bring these two parties together as equal partners to identify and deliver commercially meaningful reforms in developing and least developed countries. So what I want to kind of highlight here is the public-private partnership. And so everything we do is really grounded in this public-private partnership. And we're here to help bring your voice, the voice of the private sector and women entrepreneurs, to governments that are implementing the TFA. On the next slide, you'll see we are structured as a consortium. So we have 3 different host organizations. That's Center for International Private Enterprise, the International Chamber of Commerce, the World Economic Forum, and we also work with GIZ. We're supported by 6 donor governments, and we're also in partnership with a wide variety of private sector partners, obviously including UPS, which Esther has mentioned. And in addition to these kind of big multinational players that we partner with, we also try and work at the local level with SMEs and women-owned businesses, and of course, women's associations as well, such as OWIT. On the next slide, you will see we are active in 11 countries. That's where we are currently implementing projects. We are also scoping in an additional many other countries. So you'll see probably in the next couple of years, the project portfolio growing quite a bit. And our projects address quite different articles within the Trade Facilitation Agreement. So obviously I had mentioned those 12 articles in the presentation earlier. And just to give you a taste, so obviously I mentioned the risk management system that we've implemented in Colombia. In Zambia and Malawi, we're implementing a licensing framework for customs brokers. And just another example, we're also working with several countries across Latin America for a regional authorized economic operator framework. And of course, in all of these projects, what we are trying to do now is to ensure that we're promoting the TFA and ensuring that the implementation will be done in a way that will benefit women. And of course, on the next slide, you'll see basically to do this, to ensure that we're implementing the TFA in what we call a gender-sensitive way, we need to understand the challenges that women face to trading. And these challenges are generally quite specific to the country context, but we can also kind of point to some that are across the board, more influential for women and more influential also for small businesses. So there's a couple here, for example, on the slide: access to information, costly and complex import and export procedures, low female representation in customs agencies, customs brokers, harmonization of standards that are lacking, etc. And also what you can see on the slide here is that the Trade Facilitation Agreement actually provides the potential to tackle a lot of these challenges. So access to information challenge can be impacted to an extent by the implementation of Articles 1, 2, 6, and 7. Low female representation in customs agencies or customs brokers can also be impacted to an extent through the implementation of Articles 2 and 10. But the kind of key point underlying all of this is that, of course, the potential is there, but just implementing the TFA is not necessarily enough. What needs to be done is that we need to really make sure it's done in a gender-sensitive way, so that we're truly making sure that women's empowerment is something that comes out as a result of TFA implementation. So at the Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation, what we've done and what you'll see on the next slide is that we've created a tool that looks at the TFA, the Trade Facilitation Agreement, from a gender lens. This tool is available on our website. It's basically a tool to help policymakers or development practitioners, implementers of projects with regards to the TFA, to understand what are the barriers that women face that are tackled by the TFA articles, and then also some like gender sensitive actions that they can take to ensure the implementation takes into consideration women's challenges. So if you can show on the next slide, please, the kind of a screenshot of what that tool looks like. There you have it in front of you. And just to go on to the following slide, what you'll see is how that the tool is organized. So basically kind of just a level deeper, it's organized by TFA article. It explains what the TFA article is about. It looks at the relevant gendered barriers to trade, and then also looks at some gender sensitive actions. So if we take an example here on Article 1.2, which is about making information available through the internet. So essentially with this article, what the governments have committed to doing is they will publish on the internet, as you can see in the third column, practical guides, forms and documents required for import and export, relevant trade laws, etc. And there's obviously quite a potential that having these things readily available will be quite beneficial to women who would like to trade. But there's also sort of specific actions that need to be taken to ensure that this will actually benefit women. So of course, on the gender sensitive actions, the far column here, what we've done is put in place some specific actions that governments can take when they're implementing this article. So for example, what they would want to do is consult with women to understand what is the kind of best platform to make information readily available. Is it through a mobile-based platform? Is it through the internet? Also, of course, providing capacity building for women, because potentially there's a digital divide, which we see across many countries around the world, and that women don't have the same access to the internet or the same kind of skill set to navigate kind of complex online platforms. And so there might be some capacity building that needs to happen in order to ensure that women will also benefit from implementation of this article. So that's kind of the main area that I wanted to focus on to make you aware of, basically, is that there is this tool. It exists, and please don't hesitate to use it. Also, if you have ideas on how we can improve it, we're open to that. You'll see on the next slide some of our contact information to reach out to the Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation. And we really hope that it's something that you will use. You will also be able to share with governments if you're ever in a position where you're speaking with regulators and have this opportunity for consultation, that way you can share this with them so that they will also be aware, and together we can work towards women's economic empowerment. So thank you very much for this time, and we'll look forward to discussing further with everyone in the Q&A portion.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Candice, for sharing. I'm seeing that our time has moved along quite quickly, so I want to jump very fast into our panel discussion and Q&A. So for those of you who are with us, we will take your questions. I'm going to start with the panel discussions, and I have specific questions I'm going to ask the panelists, after which we will open it up for you to ask the questions that you would like to ask. I see some questions that have already been shared on the chat, and we will come to those. So we will come to your questions. Please, make sure that you share your questions share your questions with us so we can come to it. So I want to go to our panelists, and the first question, I want to come to you, Hlengi, and I want to ask you, the COVID pandemic has had a very large impact on businesses around the world, especially women-led and trading businesses. Can you share the impact that you've seen for your members in OWIT, in the Zimbabwe chapter? How does the current crisis make trade facilitation even more important?
Thank you, Mucha. What COVID-19 has done is been an equal opportunity destroyer, if I may put it that way. But as you know, in every situation, the impact is always felt more by women than any other group. What COVID-19 has done, and when we look at the informal sector, they are the first casualty of people that have suffered severely from COVID-19. You would also recall in my introduction that I spoke about women being in the informal sector and women in cross-border trade. The immediate onset of COVID-19, the first step, and rightly so, was to close our borders. And Zimbabwe is a landlocked country, and closing of borders, it meant instantly a shutdown of a livelihood avenue for our women. I'm not even talking about the banks closing down. I think it's all over the world globally. We have all been affected. But what it has been like for Zimbabwe is that to say that Zimbabwe is landlocked, we have felt the impact more severe. And most of the economy being driven by the informal sector, it meant also that the impact was even more severe again. And now with our women being cross-border traders, you know, cross-border trade is not a profession as it were. It's actually a survival tactic. Our women have been, as cross-border traders, they've been surviving. I mean, whatever they make for the day will actually be made to pay the meal for tomorrow. So you can imagine when the borders were closed and internally the markets, the vegetable markets, the local vendors, they were the first as well to feel the pinch of COVID-19. So what it is right now in terms of trade facilitation now, it means that we need our women to be empowered. And that's what we're talking about. For our women to be empowered, we mean that at some point they have to move from being informal traders to become formal traders. Because as we see, it is because of the nature of their businesses. The fact that they were informal, it means that they were the first casualties and there was nothing they could do about it. And yet the lockdowns are meant to save lives. And it actually becomes a catch-22 for governments to profile an economy against the lives of people. That's not a good place to be. So now what would happen now is that the economies now, we need to focus on resilient economies. And as we said earlier on, as Esther pointed out, our women are always the drivers of economies. And now as it is because of this COVID-19, the setback was felt more by them. But at the same time, we are not down and out. They are still regrouping, our women are still regrouping. And you are saying this COVID-19, we are not going to dwell on it because actually it may be there for some time. But what are we going to do about it? And it is these opportunities where we are now going to talk about making the women's businesses more resilient, making them survive. And how do we do that? Besides actually talking about having dialogue and actually upgrading our women's businesses, the informal sector, to actually matter, because it is, as much as the informal sector consists of more than 50% in Africa all around, including Zimbabwe. But how is it that they are not involved when we are calculating the gross domestic product? It is because that statistics, the data is not captured. And now, as we say, during COVID-19, the casualty, the extent of what revenues have been lost by women will never be known.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. And you know, you're right. And I like the point that you make that as an organization, OWIT Zimbabwe is working to enable women to move from being in the informal sector into the formal sector, which will ensure that, you know, they're better able to get support for their organizations. I see quite a few questions in both the chat and in the Q&A. There are a few questions asking about the slides and the presentations and the videos. I can confirm that, yes, the video, this is being recorded and the video will be made available, and the slides as well, the presentations from the different individuals who have presented today. So from UPS, from TFO, from the Alliance, and also from OWIT Zimbabwe. So for those who've asked that question, they will be made available to you. I wanted to ask a similar question to Esther before I come back to some of the questions on the chat and on the Q&A. Esther, can you share the impact on global supply chains that UPS is seeing? And really we're asking, you know, how does the current crisis make trade facilitation even more important? I know you alluded to this a little in your presentation, but if I can ask you to just share very briefly, I'll give you just a minute or two to share how does the current crisis make trade facilitation even more important?
I like that, very briefly, huh? So
Yes.
I'll try to keep it short. So of course, for us as a supply chain and a logistics provider, we have continued to operate through all the lockdowns. We never stopped, we never shut our doors. We were designated by most governments as a critical infrastructure business or an essential business or essential services provider. For us, we've had to keep up with the changing dynamics every day. When I think about, in the case of South Africa, for instance, when we first went through the lockdown, the first 3 weeks, or the first 4 weeks or so, there were regulations that were coming out every day on what we could or couldn't do. So from a, just looking at the network itself, we had network limitations. You have, as Shengi alluded to, the closing of the borders and the impact of that. We were struggling, trying to figure out how do we get volume from South Africa into Botswana. Botswana is 5 hours away from here. They shut down their borders. We had the same issue into Zimbabwe, Mozambique, I mean, all the neighboring countries, not to mention the other countries where we fly to, and they had shut down their airwaves as well. So from a trade facilitation perspective, I mean, we've seen, I did mention about the e-commerce and how we've seen an increase in the e-commerce space. It was interesting to see how we started seeing a lot of newbies first-time online purchases because with the lockdown, they couldn't be able to go out to the stores, or they couldn't be able to get some of the provisions that they needed and had to resort to e-commerce. So from a policy perspective and a trade facilitations perspective, it's ensuring that those chains, those value chains are kept open and goods are able to continue moving. From our perspective in the public affairs space and from an operational perspective, we continued to work with governments to make sure they understand the importance of ensuring that the borders are kept open, that the movement of goods can continue happening. For one, when you talk about the trade facilitation and importance, I mean, when I think about movement of critical care, so South Africa was the base of a lot of the PPEs that were moving into the SADC countries. Goods would come into South Africa and then outbound. If we're not able to move those goods across the border, these are life-saving goods that were needed in the destination. So being able to make sure that we can be able to clear those bottlenecks, work with the governments, ensure that they understand that the importance of what we're doing, and the fact that it's needed to keep the economy going. You know, there is a pandemic and we get that. There's the public health issue, but then we also have to be cognizant of all the other enabling enabling factors that are needed to continue ensuring that the economy can continue to thrive. So at UPS, I mean, I think the last six months or so, that's what we've been doing. We've been working with governments and other stakeholders to ensure that they understand the importance of the movement of goods. It's not just moving packages. You're moving you might be moving life-saving goods, or you might be enabling employment, you know, for some folks. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Esther. Nozipo, I see your comment. Nozipo Moyo says there's a reason why markets are informal. And we're talking, I think, specifically or speaking here about the comments earlier about informal markets in Zimbabwe. Formalizing the informal in a liquidated economy means taxman on your neck. So we need to advocate for conducive business environments. And I think this is a really key point that Nozipo makes, that, you know, we need to advocate for conducive business environments so that women are incentivized to then move from being informal to formal, seeing the benefit of being formal. I see a point from Edna. Edna is on the chat here saying, it's my wish for Zimbabwe as well as Africa at large to see policymakers crafting inclusive policies that will enable women to fully participate in trade and reap the trade benefits of AFTA and beyond. And I think that, yes, this is very true. And this is what the OWIT fraternity on the continent is working towards, really ensuring that we build the capacity of women in trade, that we advocate for women in trade, so that policies are inclusive. So thank you very much. There is indeed much more that needs to be done. And these are just some of the conversations we are having and looking at how we can move the needle forward. So let me go to some of the questions that are here. There's a question that was asking, Esther, I know you just spoke. There was a question where someone wanted to know a bit more about the Women Exporter Program, and there was a question whether there is a link. And then there was a question, curious to know if UPS ships frozen goods. But yeah, is there a link to learn more about the UPS Women Exporter Program? Yeah, so if you could just share that. I think you've also tackled another question here about the challenges that South Africa-based exporters and importers are faced with. And so I think you've touched on that already. So if you can just share with us a bit of insight about the program.
So Mucha, what I'll do is I'll share the information with the organizer. Then that way the information can go out to everyone with the presentation. Okay. It goes through what we do, the types of exercises, and the countries where we've got a presence, and as well as some of the other partners that we've worked with. So I'll share that information. It can be circulated to all the members or all the participants. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. There's a question here. Traditionally, the informal cross-border women traders were facing a myriad of challenges prior to this COVID crisis, paramount of which was the issue of a lack of skill sets. How are we going to ensure women are empowered, and how can they also gain confidence, especially on e-commerce? So I'm going to ask this, Chengi, can you share a little? Maybe you can tell us a bit of what OWIT Zimbabwe is doing to support women to kind of come out of this COVID pandemic and get them empowered and get them to gain confidence on e-commerce. And then I'll also point the same question. Mary Heather, I want to bring you in on the conversation on some of the work that you are doing with TFO to support women in trade, and especially on the e-commerce side. So we can start with OWIT Zimbabwe. So how are we going to ensure that women are empowered and that they can gain some confidence, especially on e-commerce, considering that the informal cross-border women traders were already facing so many challenges before COVID, and one of the biggest issues was the lack of skill set? That's a question here from Duduzile. Could you share your thoughts?
Okay, thank you, Duduzile. What it is, OWIT Zimbabwe is there actually to address the gap that exists. And one of the gaps that has been identified by OWIT Zimbabwe is that the women lack the skills which are just being highlighted. And OWIT Zimbabwe is there to actually build that capacity to have women's organizations become professional organizations. And becoming professional organizations, as it has been pointed out already, the online business has actually gone up. But what of that woman who doesn't know about the technology, the latest technology? So OWIT Zimbabwe will be there to build that capacity to ensure that our women are actually technically savvy, and that they can also participate in those the online platforms for trading. And just as well, it's also about trade on information. Our women, they don't know where to get the correct information about trade. Yes, we do have the institutions. And by the way, as I'm speaking right now, there's our Zim Trade, where there's a lot of information there. But that information will never be known to the women as long as maybe they are not exposed. They don't have the platforms like OWIT Zimbabwe, where different women, different organizations come together and they share that information to actually enable our organizations as women, not only to survive, but also to be entities that are actually responsible as far as taxation is concerned. And maybe dwelling on the issue of digitalization, it is a gap. The digital divide is there. And as OWIT, we've actually made provisions for that there's going to be capacity building along those lines. But that cannot go without our women being empowered to know more about trade. And it's not only the digitalization aspect. There are a lot of other factors that will actually affect our women. So as OWIT Zimbabwe, we look at all those factors. And at the end of the day, the final product should be that we have an empowered women in terms of information on the trade, in terms of skills, like which is being spoken about, that they're actually technically savvy. They are aware of how to maneuver in the digital space. And thirdly, is trade facilitation. As we said, the women in cross-border trade, most of their time is actually spent at the borders. And the delays at the border, the bureaucracy and everything, it doesn't mean that it's the government of Zimbabwe only which has got to sort that one out. We have to come together, the private sector, the government, and other stakeholders to ensure that our borders, not only women are able to trade, but they can also have safe trade. As we know, delays at the border, they impact more on women. And as research says, women suffer from time poverty because of the multiple roles they play in an economy. So to answer directly this question of capacity building as far as technical skills are concerned, yes, OWIT is the right place to be. That platform is there to actually ensure that those skills are properly honed and women can participate in international markets, not only as cross-border traders. They should actually venture into those international markets. That is what the webinar is about today. We want to upscale. We want to be more than informal sector women. We want to be more than cross-border traders. And the ACFTA actually as well is going to be a good platform where we are going to start trading regionally while preparing to venture into the international markets. And just as another point before we run out of time, the AFTA itself has got a platform whereby if our traders are meeting any challenges, there's the AU Observatory where they are going to deposit whatever barriers they are coming across as traders. And the simplified trade regime procedure is there for the women in cross-border trade, people in the informal sector who are not registered, so that they can actually enjoy the reduced duty rates that are going to come with the AFCFTA. So there is much to learn. We need our information as traders. We must be conversant as women. We must know about this trade agreement that is coming. And we must know how to navigate it. And there's one of the ways for us to come together, become a member of the OWIT Zimbabwe, and we, together with other associations, we'll make it happen. We'll make trade happen for us.
I think that you know, your last point there is really important. I think for any woman who is currently in international trade or looking to do international trade, it is imperative that you are part of an organization that can support you in doing so. When you try and do it alone, you are not going to get access to all these things that we are talking about today. I see on the Q&A there's a few other questions, and I think that they've been tackled somewhat. We're talking about how to expedite women's economic empowerment for them to move from being survivalists to real contributors in the economic mainstream. I think that's a really good question from Bia there. So how do we expedite women's economic empowerment for them to move from survivalists to real contributors in the economic mainstream? Mary Heather, I want to come to you. There's a couple of questions that are specifically for you, and then I'd like you to also tackle a few others. So one that's specifically for you here is a question to Mary from TFO Canada. Most of us in Nigeria have done the quiz export readiness assessment. What is next? So what are we supposed to do after that, I think is the question there. And then there's another question, and I love this question, Nozipo, because this one is very applicable to me. Trade is not just products. Where do women in service provision benefit in region and across the globe as far as trade is concerned? So Mary Heather, if you can tackle that. And then lastly, Mary Heather, you know, what can we do to push the needle? What can we do to push the needle as organizations that support women in trade? So as OWIT Zimbabwe, as OWIT, I represent OWIT Nairobi. What can we do to expedite? What can we do to push the needle? So Mary Heather, that's 3 questions for you. Individuals who have completed the assessment, what next? Then there's a question about services. What about women in services? We're feeling left behind. And then lastly, what do you think we can do to push the needle? Mary Heather, over to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Well, in terms of specific requests from Nigeria, what I would say is what is next is after you've done the export readiness quiz about the Canadian market, you will be guided to develop an export plan or to update your export plan for the Canadian market in particular. And the first step, of course, is to do the research on the demand for your product. Who are the current suppliers? What's the competition like? And really assess your competitiveness in that market. So I would say that that would be the next step for an SME that's interested in exploring the Canadian market. And we certainly do have a tool on the website to guide you to develop that export plan, and that will ask you those questions that you can then do the research and find out. There's many tools there that will help you see what the trends are, know what the pricing is, know what regulations you have to meet, and even explain who already has what market share and who the current importers are of those products. So there's quite a bit of information that can be utilized to flesh out that export plan. In terms of services, I actually thought this question might have been from you, Mucha, because I know you asked me before. This is definitely a sector for TFO Canada. Agro-food is our big sector. We also work in a number of other sectors, but we've also had a lot of success working with companies in the services sector, specifically ICT. In some ways, it does work the same, except that the delivery of the products, in this case, the delivery of the services is different. And some of those partnerships that you form with the buyer may take a different form. Sometimes they take on more of a collaborative arrangement, a partnership approach. So it may not be always the more traditional idea of a product, in this case a service, enters the market in that traditional way. There are different ways of forming those buyer-seller relationships that are specific to the services sector. You will find information on our website, and I know as well the International Trade Center does provide information on the services sector. Services, of course, are quite broad. There are also tourism falls into that category, health services, education services. There are a number of different services that are encompassed under that broader sector. But do look into that, and we are definitely including that as a focus area for our work with women SMEs in the 2 projects that were mentioned earlier. How do we push the needle as organizations? That's a really good question, because all of us as gender champions have been trying to push the needle in a number of areas over these past many decades and centuries. And I think we also need to remember that we have made a lot of progress, although there's still more progress to be made, and we from time to time face setbacks, as we've seen more. We can see in COVID how perhaps some of those steps forward that we feel we've made as women may have been still not quite, we haven't made as much progress as we wanted to make, because when the crisis happened, we saw a lot of the impact falling back again on women. And this is about our multiple roles. And I think for me, the way that I would see us as organizations pushing the needle forward is to have much more recognition and continue to work on having governments recognize these multiple roles that women still bear the brunt, and to work, we have to work collaboratively. I remember a project that we did in Honduras, and it was about worker safety in coffee plantations. And what some of the research showed was really the countries where the compliance, or I should say the benefits, the real changes that happened were those where the government actually had a strong role to play in putting in place regulations, minimum standards, criterias, requirements. So I feel that we need to work very closely to try to get those legislations in place. We want to see international agreements like the CEDAW, elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. We want to see those international covenants being put into legislation at the country level or at lower levels where it's going to make a difference. What it boils down to is, do women have access to childcare? Do women have access? Do women still continue to play the caregiving roles? And how can we support governments to help move that concept that this is just the natural role of women? We need to have governments supporting women in those multiple roles.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm looking at the time, and oh my goodness, we have run out of time. I can't believe it. I know there are some questions that we may not have come to, and Shengi, maybe this is a note that this conversation still could have gone on, and perhaps we may need to have a revisit of this webinar. I'm going to ask you to just allow me to take license. I'd like to get a parting shot from each of our panelists. 30 seconds, ladies, I'd like you to give me a 30-second parting shot as we close before I wrap up our conversation. So if I can ask, please, let's do a 30-second parting shot. Candice, can I start with you, please?
Absolutely. Thank you everyone for your comments. Thanks everyone for your engagement as well. It's been a really great discussion. I think the main takeaway for me is that obviously we've had a lot of discussion. We kind of know what we need to do, but now the matter is actually doing it, right? And so I think a couple key takeaways. Make sure that you're bringing your voice to associations like OWIT, to national trade facilitation committees, making sure that your voice as women in trade is heard by your government and by those around you. That's my main takeaway.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Candice. Esther, can I come to you?
Thank you, Mucha. Great conversation. I enjoyed listening to the different panelists and their contribution. Shengi, you're my neighbor, so I think next time, once the borders open, you and I need to get together, in either one of the countries. I think for me, it's don't sit back and wait for someone else to do the work, someone else to do the advocacy. You know, your voice is important. You have an opinion to contribute. Get active, join the OWITs, there's multiple organizations out there where you can be able to have your voice heard and amplified. And for us from the private sector, there's a lot more we can do, and we'll continue to do our part. It's ensuring that we can be able to leverage, the expertise that we have to help the SMEs, and that's something we'll continue to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Esther. Mary Heather, your parting shot?
Yeah, I think I've been reading the comments, and I think I just want to, I'm gonna steal Susan Baca's comment. She's saying that we are the visible faces, the visible women faces, and there's so many women involved in trade that are not visible, and that drive the economy in so many different ways. In all the roles that we play. So I think these champions that are on the call today and everybody participating, let's try to move forward together with the faces that aren't as visible, and let's make sure that we are working for them. And I know that that's definitely at the heart of all of the work that everyone on the call today is doing. We want to really focus our efforts on women, SMEs, get them give them what they need in order to succeed. It may be moving them from informal to formal. It may be finding other solutions that work for them. So let's just do what they need.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mary Heather. Chengi, the final parting shot as from an OWIT Zimbabwe perspective.
Oh, thank you, Mucha. And I want to thank all the participants for taking time to actually share your comments about the webinar. Certainly, there is a lot to do. And from OWIT Zimbabwe, I'm also extending the invitation to other neighboring countries, which I'm sure they are here, that please, let's have a collective voice. Let's be part of these big organizations so that our amplified voice can be effective and can reach our policymakers faster than a lone voice. And I am saying, as far as trade facilitation is concerned, you need to be aware, in order for you to enjoy trade facilitation, you need to be aware of the trade barriers so that you can point them out. How else can you know them when you are alone? You need to come collectively and point out what we want our governments to do. Our governments are there to enable the business environment. And lucky for my government, as I'm thinking now, we have signed the TFA and we have signed the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. So in a way, although more is to be done, but I think as women, let's push them more. We want more. We'll ask for more, like Oliver Twist. We want more. We want to see in every platform. And OWIT Zimbabwe is reaching out to you every corner. We want to have an OWIT in every corner of Africa so that we push the AFCFTA forward. Thank you. And Esther will be talking about logistics is there as well, playing a very vital role. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I love that. Oliver Twist, we want more. As I was thinking about how I would end the conversation, I think you've led me to the place where I just want to say, you know, there's the African proverb that is very often shared: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that is a very fitting proverb to use as we close, that we are only really going to push the needle if we do it together. I think across the continent, there are very many women organizations that are working in their pockets. I think it's time for us to pull together so that we can actually have a greater impact. And as I mentioned when we started, we at the OWIT fraternity are excited to have OWIT Zimbabwe on board. And you know, we hope that we could have OWITs everywhere that are working together to move forward this agenda. And I hope that we'll be able to have more conversations like this. There's a comment in the chat: we want to talk about money, please. Let's talk about money. Let's talk about finance. I'm sure Esther could have a conversation just about logistics in the entire hour and a half. So I think there's opportunity to have more of these conversations. So thank you so much to everyone who is on board. Oh my goodness, I must add that. Stella, I see your comment. OWIT Mozambique is on its way. I love the sound of that. Thank you so much. A special thank you to our panelists today. Thank you to Mary Heather White. Thank you to from TFO Canada. Thank you to Esther Ndichu from UPS. And a very special thank you to Cheney from OWIT Zimbabwe and Candice White from the Alliance, who have come together to put on this webinar. So thank you so much to everyone who joined us today. Thank you for sharing your questions. I do apologize if we didn't get to all of them, but I have a very strong feeling that this will not be the last time that we are together. Thank you very much and have a very good afternoon, evening, or morning, depending on where you are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
It was great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
Have a good weekend.
All right, bye guys.
Good
Thank you.
job.
Great evening.
Thank you.
As usual, as usual, as usual.
Thanks, Esther.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you,
Take
guys.
care.
All
Thanks.
right. Bye, everyone.
Bye now.